What is good, people? Welcome back to another video on 8 count. I know this one's late, but I wanted to get out anyway. Today we have my picks for UFC 287. So far in the year, we are 25 correct picks out of 44. So not too bad. I'm hoping to improve at this weekend. Some really tough fights to call. As always, leave a comment with your picks in the comment section down below. Always like to see them. Leave a like if you do enjoy the video and subscribe to the channel as well. Let's kick things off with the main event. Alex Pereira taking on Israel Adesanya for the fourth time. I think that's kind of an important mark as well. How stale is this matchup to them? Is it exciting to them? I think for Adesanya it's probably more exciting than it is for Pereira. But either way, it's still an interesting fight to me. I think Pereira coming in, he's going to be so high on confidence, right? He's got 3 wins over Adesanya, and you know, he must be booming. Adesanya, on the other hand, can take confidence even in some of his losses. I think the first fight, he was kind of robbed in that one. I think the second fight, it was kind of similar to the third, in which he really had Pereira hurt. It was kind of lucky for Pereira in the way the ref decided the 8 count was going to be ruled in the second fight, and then the last fight, you know, it was at the end of the round. But I think over the course of all of these fights, Pereira has actually been the second best fighter. Yes, he's got the victories, but in terms of the overall fight, I think Adesanya's had more success overall. I think if you look at like portions of the fight kind of dominated by fighter, you'd say Adesanya's probably the better of the two. I think in this matchup it makes it hard because Israel Adesanya is always worried about that power of Pereira. Last time out, we saw him try and nullify that with a bit of grappling, and I do think we're going to see grappling again in this fight, and I think it's probably going to be caused by Adesanya looking for a takedown, probably in those middle rounds once again. But I do expect to see an Alex Pereira with an even better takedown defense game, and I don't think Israel is the greatest grappler in the world, so I don't expect him to have the highest sort of success. So I do kind of see Pereira nullifying that in this fight, which could be interesting, you know, to see him on the feet a lot more. I think some of the biggest weapons used from Adesanya in all of his career has been the leg kicks. I think when he gets the leg kicks off, he's very dominant. And we've seen now in his 2 losses inside the UFC, once someone's able to check them, they're able to have huge success against him. Obviously, the Jan Blachowicz fight, Jan was able to get takedowns later on in the fight, kind of nullify some of the attacks from the outside of Adesanya. But in the Pereira fight, he's actually able to nullify the movement of Adesanya with some real sturdy checks. So for Adesanya, if he's going to have success, I think looking back on his career, you would say he's got to land those leg kicks. But how is he going to do it? It's going to have to be some new setups for him. And, you know, I think if he does get him off, he's going to have success. But once again, he's going to have to look out for those checks. In terms of the other striking, you know, the range in which Adesanya is going to be using, a lot of the times is dictated by those leg kicks. You know, if he can land the leg kicks, he can dictate the range and also set up other strikes. So it's very important to him. In terms of Pereira, I think my biggest question mark about him would be, can he get into the fight a bit earlier? I think last time out, he kind of let the fight pass him by. Yes, he was kind of really stunned badly at the end of the first round, but we didn't really see him have huge success again until the kind of 5th round. I think in terms of his fight last time out, yes, he had moments, but he wasn't able to have huge spells of dominance. So it'd be interesting to see if he can do that again in this fight, or if he can actually have those dominant moments in this fight. I think if he can, you know, there's more likely to be good scoring towards him, because I think with the threat of his power, it doesn't take much for the judges to give stuff in his favor. In this fight though, my pick's going to go with Izzy. I think out of the 2 on the feet, he's got more tools to work with. I do think if it does go into a grappling exchanges, you know, he's been doing it a bit longer, so I expect him to have a bit more skill than Pereira. But we're going to have to wait and see. I think it's a close fight. It's a pick 'em. You know, it's hard to pick against a guy who's gone 3-0 against the other, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to go with Izzy. A tough fight to pick, but I think he's probably the better of the 2. It would be interesting to see a Pereira win, to see what would happen. I think he'd actually relinquish the sort of the middleweight title and probably look for a move up to 205, because I do think this cut is probably not maintainable for him. And I think, you know, with his age and the longevity of his career in mind, I think a move up to 205 would actually be the smart move. I think some of the matchups up there are maybe a bit more difficult, but yeah, I think it's a smart move for his career. In the co-main event, we have Gilbert Burns taking on Jorge Masvidal. You know, in my opinion, Masvidal really had that shine out year, but it's been all downhill since then. Obviously, he got the win over Darren Till, Ben Askren, and Nate Diaz, but since then, back-to-back losses against Kamaru Usman, won by absolutely heart-wrenching defeat with that knockout, and the other defeat came by the hands of Kobe Covington, a 5-round decision victory for Kobe, and Jorge just had a really poor performance. What Jorge are we going to see in this fight? I think that's going to be interesting. In my opinion, you look at his age, and I do expect him to have already hit his peak. And he did kind of have a late sort of rise to shine. He's always been a decent fighter and had great moments, but it wasn't until later in his career he really boomed with popularity and had those special finishes. I think it's probably the end for him now. There is retirement talk about him, so I think when that comes into play, it's probably time. I think for Gilbert Burns, on the other hand, he's just kind of getting started. He had his one run at the title, obviously the defeat against Kamaru Usman. Since then, he's put together some nice victories against Stephen Thompson and Neil Magny. The only defeat coming since the title fight was against Chimaev. But I think actually looking at that matchup, if he was to fight it a different way, he could potentially get the win in that. I do think Khamzat's a tough matchup for a lot of people at welterweight, but I don't think it's an unbeatable opponent for Gilbert Burns. But I think what he did do in that fight was earn a lot of respect and hype himself up a lot with the style of the fight he chose to take against Chimaev and the success he had as well. In my opinion, this fight probably goes one way. Yes, Jorge could get a win here, but I'm going to pick Gilbert Burns. I think on the feet, his threat of power is going to cause Masvidal problems, and I think he's probably going to be able to get into some grappling exchanges in which he gets, control for dominant amount of time, maybe 3 minutes here, 2 minutes there. So that's the way I see it playing out. Yes, I think Masvidal's takedown defense is really underrated compared to a lot of people. I think people don't look at it enough. Obviously, last time out, it was a poor performance against Kobe, but I do expect to see a better Masvidal in this fight. But I'm still going to pick Burns. Rob Font against Adrian Yanez. A tough fight to pick, really is. Rob Font, a guy who's had, sort of like really good victories in his career. He's coming off back-to-back defeats, however, against Jose Aldo and Chito Vera. But I think you look at some of the names he's beaten before that. The Pettis win has aged like fine wine. The Simon win as well. Simon last time out looked really good. Moraes, yeah, and Garbrandt, yeah. But I think the quality of opponents is at a higher level than Yanez for sure. Although I think Yanez has got something about him which is special. I think this fight is going to take place mostly in kind of that mid to close range. I expect it to be more of a boxing fight than I do sort of like an MMA fight. And I think the problem for Yanez is probably going to be the jab of Font. I think it's one of the better weapons that Font has, and it's actually been a weapon which has kind of caused Yanez issues in the past. I'm going to go over Yanez victory, however. I think his determination and the speed at which he's going to kind of cause this fight to happen at, the sort of pace, I think he's going to dictate the tempo. I think he's going to put on Rob Font. I could see a potential finish for him, in all honesty. Maybe a second round TKO, which is tough, right? Because you look at the people who haven't been able to get Rob Font out of there. Chito Vera, Jose Aldo, it's some really good names and some real good fighters. But I think Yanez potentially could do it. I'm going to go with Yanez finish in round 2. We move on to the welterweight bout between Kevin Holland and Santiago Ponzinibbio. For me, my main questions are around Santiago. He's a guy who went on that kind of tear back in the day and just hasn't had the success since that. Obviously, he had the win against Nelson, Mike Perry, Neil Magny. But since the comeback, the loss against Leach, it was a close win against Baeza. He was able to get the finish. Oh, he actually got a decision. I remember him finishing that fight for some reason, but lost against Jeff Neal. And last time out, he kind of lost against Pereira Lima, and he got the win against Moreno. But he just isn't the fighter that he once was. I don't think he can take damage the way he could once upon a time in Hollywood. But he can't take the damage which he once could. But I think he offensively isn't as strong as he was either. I think maybe the confidence in his chin is kind of letting him down. I think he's going to probably look to come forward in this fight. and I think that's going to be to his detriment. I do see Kevin Holland with some long sort of strikes out of range catching him, so I'm going to go over Kevin Holland knockout, and I'm going to go for a round 2 knockout as well. Other fights on the card, there's some bangers. We're going to kick things off with the first fight on the main card, Raul Rojas Jr. versus Christian Romero. This kid is just getting so much hype, and you know, I'm not hating on it, but I do feel like it's kind of undeserved, right? Yes, he's young and he's talks whatever sort of shit, but for me, I'd like to see some of the other fighters who have actually got really good wins on their record get some of this hype. You know, maybe it can be there for everyone, but at this moment in time, I'd like to see other people get a bit more of a push. But they're pushing him either way. I think he gets a win and he gets one quick in this one. I think probably looking at a submission in the first round. So I'm taking Rojas Jr. But it's going to be interesting to see what he looks like in 5 years' time. We've seen people come into the sport and, you know, have this sort of rise, but never really reach their full potential. It'd be interesting to see if he can. You know, hopefully he can as well, because he seems genuine enough. Chris Curtis against Calvin Gastelum. This is one of the fights of the card, in my opinion. Question marks over Calvin Gastelum. What sort of fighter is he now? Personally, I just don't see it. I don't think he's still got it anymore. I think coming into this fight, if he loses it, I think he's in a situation in which he has to make the cut to 170, which is disappointing because I think we need more weight divisions because it's unfair. I think 170 to 185 is 15 pounds. That's a huge cut for anyone. So I'd like to see more divisions for sure. Maybe 155, 165, 175, everything like that. But for me right now, I just see Chris Curtis dominating him. I think on the feet, he's probably got, you know, Calvin's got some really nice shots and combination punching, but I think Chris Curtis will hang in there with him, and I think he messes him up bad. I'm going to go for Chris Curtis, maybe a 3rd round stoppage or late decision. Some of the other fights, I'm taking Michelle Waterson. She's coming back at strawweight. Someone who has kind of been screwed in her career in the UFC. Never had her own weight division. She's not a 115 pounder. She's a 105 an atom weight. So I would have loved to have seen her maybe in her prime getting sort of the love from the UFC in an atom weight division. I think she could have been a huge star. She already is, but even bigger in my opinion. At middleweight, I'm taking Joe Pyfer against Gerald Meerschaert, who's kind of an underrated fighter in my opinion. He's had some good sort of results inside of the UFC octagon, but I think after that loss to Hamzat, a lot of people overlook him. I don't think Joe Pyfer will, but I do think he'll get a finish early in this fight. At heavyweight, Cole Williams coming in on a short notice, replacing Chris Barnett. He's taking on Chase Sherman. For me, I'm a big Chase Sherman fan. I really like his style. In terms of his striking, you know, I think heavyweight's a difficult one because I think if you're not elite and you don't have that confidence in yourself, there's an ability for you to lose quite a bit. And I think that's happened with Chase Sherman, but his striking's very good. He lands a leg kick very well and his hands are nice as well. I like him. I just think he needs to go over that hump. I think if he could get a couple big wins, you know, he could easily be a top 15 inside the UFC heavyweight division, but he's never really made that leap yet. I'd love to see him get an early stoppage here. So I'm taking Sherman. In terms of the early prelims, there's one fight I'm going for, and I'm taking Lupi against Cynthia Calvillo. Although I do think this fight maybe runs into the hands of Calvillo. I think Lupi will look for the takedowns early in the fight, and potentially Calvillo could have some success with some scrambles later on. But I'm going to take Lupi. So in total, I think we've picked 10 fights on this card. So by the end of this fight night, we should be at 54 picks. Hopefully we're at like 35 wins as well, but I doubt that. I'm pretty sure we've gone wrong somewhere. But as always, guys, if you did enjoy today's video, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and let me know your picks in the comment section down below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Peace out.